So I was born in Manchester and spent most of my formative years in South Manchester, mainly Stockport. With my dad in the building trade around most of the northwest, I grew up surrounded by stories of local hard men, and one that I always found really interesting. In fact, I remember seeing his book, one of his books, sat on my grandma's dresser, and it was black. I remember looking at it, and you'll see a similar picture of it in a minute. I was surrounded by stories of Cliff Twemlow, the self-made legend of the Northwest. I didn't really know all of the full details and the depth of what he did, but now Severin Films can allow me and you to watch the wonderful documentary, which I've already seen. It's actually available on Tubi as well. Bloody Legend, the Complete Cliff Twemlow Collection. Now, the video that I'm going to tell you is going to just show you everything. I'm going to really dive into this incredible box set. It looks wonderful. It's got lots of VHS-style art, exclusive extras. It really is a love letter to an unsung icon of the video nasty era. Well, I suppose not unsung anymore. So if you're from Manchester or in the surrounding areas, South Manchester, like I was, Cliff was seen as a nightclub bouncer, bodybuilder, pulp novelist, and yes, he was an ultra-low budget, blood-soaked filmmaker who made the Northwest feel like Hollywood for a brief, brilliant moment. I remember some of the people that have worked with him turning up in Coronation Street, and back when everybody used to go on their school trip to Granada Studios, which I probably did about 4 or 5 times. I remember seeing there was a character called Charlie, and I remember him being in a Cliff Twemlow film. So Severin Films have unleashed Bloody Legend, the Complete Cliff Twemlow Collection, and I finally got my hands on it. So let's take you inside what might be the most ambitious tribute ever to a real underground icon. So there was always this buzz that anything could happen, certainly around the 80s, not always in a positive way. My dad would mention a bouncer who made films. I'm pretty sure it was in the Manchester Evening News at one point as well, and we used to get that quite regularly. You'd walk past different places. Obviously, people remember places like Hacienda, and people will tell you different things. So there's lots of stories, but there was a story about someone filming a fight scene outside the Britannia, which I think made it into the local news. And the Britannia would often be where a lot of works dues would be held, so people would chat on about it a lot. Now, what I like about Cliff was he didn't wait for permission. He made movies with muscles, no studio, no budgets, just drive. That was sometimes to his detriment. And the films, well, they were rough, they were raw, but they were unforgettable. They're not 5-star films, but they're full of fun. So from GBH to Eye of Satan, Cliff's movies are time capsules of backstreet ambition and stubborn northern pride. So what's in the box? Well, it's a monster box, and I know there are lots of other different versions of packages you could get with t-shirts and all kinds of things, but let's just focus on the box. So in there is GBH, Grievous Bodily Harm, the big one, fully remastered, looks gritty and gorgeous. The Eye of Satan, pure madness, shot across continents on Cliff's own dime, well, Cliff and other people. Firestar, First Contact, Aliens, Mind Control, Manchester. If you remember Quasar, it was very, very similar. Tuxedo Warrior, Moonstalker, some Cliff written, some Cliff produced. And this for me is the best bit of the whole box set. There is an album there of all the synth scores that he did. He, under a different name, scored some pretty big TV shows and films, and really did have in another life could have been a composer solely. Now there's 10 hours of extras on here, commentaries from producers, directors, and Cliff's collaborators. There's the full documentaries on there, which has fans, friends, filmmakers. The trailers are on there for everyone, the VHS scans, booklets with essays on each film, replica VHS artwork, even articles from newspapers. It is a love letter to the guy, who had a bit of grit, sweat, and probably a crowbar. It wasn't polished by any chance, but it is real. So in an age of manufactured streaming content, watching GBH, it makes you feel alive. It takes you back to that time where it's almost like you could write your own book and put it in the library. It's like this. It says he was putting them in the video shop. It's like you can smell the fog and the sweat and the ambition on the screen. So as a Stockport lad myself, seeing our streets in war zones, and I knew all the names of the certain people. I'm almost even now too scared to mention the names of some of them and of some of the gangs that were really just mentioned about in school. Everybody talked about them in school. Everybody had an uncle who was related to them, or anybody who was working in certain businesses needed protection from certain people, and often the people you needed protection from were very close to the people who were protecting you. So it did feel a little bit like a war zone at that time, and I guess that's sort of glamorized here a little bit. But one thing about Cliff is he allowed you to get into intergalactic bases, and, you know, these films weren't just made around, they weren't gritty Mike Lee-esque films. They were what Hollywood would be like if they didn't have any money and they were filming it on a shoestring. And that's the power of being a local legend. So he might never have won an Oscar, and he has got immortality. Cult immortality, which I think is even better. So here it is. It's a set that immortalizes not just a filmmaker, but a movement. The documentary shows all the friends and enemies he made along the way. But it's a moment when Video Nasties roared out of the north as well. So if you're new to him, I'd start with GBH. If you're a long-time fan, just work your way through it, and it's everything you hope for. If you've got stories of the times, or memories, or tapes of your own, drop them in the comments. Let's celebrate the mad, beautiful legacy of Cliff. So if you could subscribe for more, I'll cover all of the cult movies that we want to talk about. Take care. Hey, be careful out there.